Welcome to Speak Sex. I am your host, Eurydice. I'm your sex whisperer here on the internet universe. And today I'm very happy because I have with me a role model and a woman who studied so much in the field of sexology, definitely in the state of Florida, where I am. Her name is Dr. Marilyn Volker. And you can find her all over the internet because she's been at this so very long, right?
Oh, that's what happens when you're almost 75 years old. See, that's
wow.
what happens when you're almost 75. That's right.
Yeah, so we will have to have a film about your career, the way Dr. Ruth had that amazing film about her career.
Great documentary.
I know, I loved it.
In fact,
it was so inspiring.
I was asked to go to the Jewish Film Festival there to make some comments, and really, really amazing. So anybody who's interested in, like yourself, who's put so much time, you just keep a log of everything that you have done and documented. It's great.
Yeah, we have to do that. Mm-hmm. Yes. So Marilyn, I would like to start. I mean, there's so much to cover, and my emphasis will be on surrogacy, on sexual surrogates, how one finds them, how one becomes one, because we haven't touched on it at all on the podcast.
Oh, then that's
good. So that would be the main theme of the episode. Sure. But I would like to also get into the span of your career, because it's pretty extraordinary. Marilyn was the daughter of a minister.
Yes.
And therefore married the minister.
Yes.
Right?
That's what you did if you had a vagina. In my day, if you had a penis,
church,
you became a minister. If you had a vagina, you married a minister.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, my grandfather was a minister. I loved him very dearly. And so, yes, my mom is a cantor. You know, his son, of course, joined the church. So, yes, I understand. And that was in St. Louis, and there was a moment where Masters and Johnsons were there.
Right.
And I don't know if that's when, but anyway, you married the minister, you started the church, and I love the name of the church, the French Clergy.
French Clergy. French Clergy. Well, you know, the interesting part about this was I grew up
We're all French clergy, may I say?
I think so. I grew up in my father had a church in Texas, so in those days there was no wall, there was no nothing. We went back and forth, and everybody was just fine. And then we moved to Kentucky and Ohio, and we were like army kids, you know, moving around. And I liked that. Some of my sibs didn't like the moving so much. But what happened was I was pushed into being visible. And that's a very important part. And I was pushed into meeting a lot of people. Anybody could have been sitting around our table, from homeless people to the mayor to whomever. My mother always had amazing that she could have enough food for everybody. But that was my life. Here, Marilyn, you're 3 years old.
And that's the beauty, you know, of the church or, you know, spiritual, you know, lifestyle. I mean, I do it a lot. You know, I feel like even if we don't call ourselves a specific faith, you know, having that openness is spirit work.
Yes,
you know?
Very much.
It's very much driven by like love of humanity and support.
In fact, that's what the surrogates often, they really are about finding something more than just body parts, you know, connected. But when we went to the seminary in St. Louis, my former husband and I, we were taking all the things in the original language, which is not English, and studying with people who studied what was happening at the time. It's called exegetical study. It's really important to see that rather than just taking things out of context and throwing a passage at people. But the interesting part was then...
What's the original language?
The original Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic.
Yes.
Oh, sure. There were lots of people who were teaching us. And also, you know, we learned that Jesus was not a white boy. He did not speak English.
Of course not.
He's a Jewish guy who really... So the interesting part about this is, you know, to be sure and say this. So, but the staff from Masters and Johnsons, who were really not only big, but they were bigly criticized, and who are these people? And so they came to the seminary, and they gave a presentation, and they were utilizing surrogates at the time, and surrogate means substitute. It was a substitute partner when somebody didn't have one, like 40-year-old virgins that I work with now in sex therapy, okay? 40-year-old virgins, or people who were in accidents and their bodies now have been really changed, or soldiers who came back whose bodies, their partners might have left them and nobody would want to date them, a cerebral palsy person, somebody who doesn't know how their body works. And
or someone who's been through extreme sexual trauma.
And so that part, we were like deer in the headlight, because of course we're like 20 years old and thinking, oh my gosh, why do we need to know this? But there are no accidents in my life ever.
So what year was that?
That was, all right, hold on. 1969,
Wow,
68, 69.
That's a great year, 68, 69 in general.
That's right. And of course,
Like
it was those.
my hallelujah year. I wasn't there, but
see?
I wasn't alive.
Amazing,
but yeah.
amazing. And my parents had told me there's nothing nasty on your body. My Marine uncle told me you better know about your body. But I hadn't really taken any classes in those days. There weren't really any. So we moved down to Miami. We had a great church. We were working with the
fringe
Pedro
clergy.
fringe clergy, and we worked with the Pedro Pan kids getting them to safe homes. We worked with the Cesar Chavez migrant farm worker kids, getting to be sure they had information in schools. We helped to start the first AIDS. It was called Health Crisis Network. Now it's called Care Resource here. We started the first LGBT group. Well, there was no T, and there wasn't even a B at the time. There was gay and lesbian.
Right.
And and of course I worked with deaf people at the time, so we taught the signs for gay and lesbian lunch. Don't get those confused, okay? Confusing.
Lesbian and lunch are reversed. That's very funny.
Yes. And so, we could spend a whole time on sign language and sex, that's for sure. And so that we started.
But can I say, I don't want to interrupt, but just for a moment, just to point out, to our listeners, because very often we think, okay, religion is against sex, and we have to overcome our religious upbringing and our religious, conditioning in order to be fully sexual. But when we hear the actual history of it, at least the recent history of it, maybe not what's happening in the Vatican, I don't know, but the history of it in America, it is actually the church that is opening up, people to the sexual healing, to the sexual revelation, to the sexual acceptance of each other, whether it's gay and lesbian or HIV or
in Miami,
surrogacy.
In
Miami,
Miami,
at the forefront.
Yes, in Miami. It was the churches that started the first switchboard of Miami, the first AIDS project. Dr. Marilyn had the first gay men with HIV in the church setting. Some of our wonderful rabbis had opened their hearts and temples to meetings. And oh my gosh, parents, flags meet in churches.
I think what's happened is that we have a short memory, or we're young, and we live in a moment where evangelicals seem to be representative of the religious in the country. They're not. So we forget this very important aspect of the inclusivity, where body and spirit are not necessarily divided and separated. In religious practice.
And we've had this last conference there were priests and nuns and rabbis who happened to be transgender, and they stood up to say what that was like for them. So we've really come extraordinary ways, but it's always has been. So when we started the first teen group at Miami-Dade, it was not because of me. It's never because of me. It's because people will come and say, do you want to be a part? We would like a place to meet. And when these 14-year-old young gay boys at Miami-Dade, this was in the 70s, came up and said, we want a place to meet. And our son was about 14 at the time. I said, where are you meeting now? And they said, it just stunned me. Bars, beaches, bathhouses, bookstores, bushes.
Bookstores is actually not bad.
Not bad. They're behind the scenes.
Empty bookstores.
Yeah. Well, my righteous anger comes, and there is a point where I'm nice, but there's a point where what do you mean? That's the only place you can meet? And so I just marched myself up to Dr. Padron and said, we have to do this. We have to have a place, and it has to be named a class so they don't have to lie to their parents. And we have to call it developing your self-esteem. So that was even before the B word, bisexual. That came in later, and the T word, transgender. But all of these things I have been so honored to be a real part of. Well, to get back to the surrogate, because that's what you wanted to.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm learning this information, and there are no accidents. I'm at a party. There's a psychiatrist who happens to have taken sex therapy classes as well. And he's saying, like right here, this distance we are, I wish I knew a surrogate, because I have a patient who is a virgin and 40 some years old. Now I'm standing there, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a counselor, and I'm thinking, Marilyn, you could do this, because it's really about teaching step by step. Now, we had no training programs at the time. We had no training programs. Like now, there's an International Professional Surrogates Association, IPSA, and Dr. K's group down in Texas. But, so we just knew we were going by the seat of our pants, but we also followed what Masters and Johnson's had said, you need to have a supervisor. So I tap him on the shoulder. This is me. And I go, I think I can do it. I think I can do this. And he looks at me, and I go, well, this is my background. This is my, you think, yes, but I have to be supervised. And so it was about 6 years of still taking classes, and also working in special needs, and also being a mom, and so the interesting.
And how often did you do the surrogate work?
Well, it's not something you can do 24/7. It's really can be very exhausting. I probably saw in those 6 years, probably I'd say 50 people.
That's a lot,
and they were extraordinary. Each one had what I call, like we all have BS, the backstories, and that they all had amazing backstories. And so I just began to follow step by step, and was supervised by these sex therapists. And so we started first talking about what happened to our bodies, or body image. It's called body mapping.
Body mapping.
Body mapping. And when we started, it was about touch, and there's 5 types of touch. One was observational touch. How does something feel? Well, what happens if you're paralyzed? Where on your body would you feel
still have sensation?
Arousal? Absolutely. It could be under armpits, earlobes, out the head. Oh, amazing things neurologically. And so then, but we weren't worried so much
and everybody's different, so you do have to do the mapping.
Oh, yes, body mapping. And then we would do these 5
So what
types
are the types of touch?
touches. Observation touch. Nurturing touch, because a whole lot of people never got nurtured. And also, sometimes they were nurtured inappropriately. And then sometimes, if they, let's say, were shy boys who got bullied, and they have to put this in context. They never held hands with anybody. Never.
Yeah.
Never. Forget the sex even part.
The masculine, aspect of the gender is so
never
oppressed.
Hugged in a way of connection. Never kissed. Never had
on the
anal
lips,
sex, oral sex, or vaginal or anal sex. Okay, never. Wow. So the interesting part, when you're 40 years old, and when you see other...
So the touches are observational, nurturing.
Then comes one called playful. But I have to be careful, because sometimes playful is a trigger if somebody's got into a playful game and got abused.
Has trauma.
So we've had to be very
slow.
careful.
I assume careful means slow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we get feedback. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't.
How does this feel?
Tell me what you would change if you did this again, which is, by the way, what we do with couples. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't. I do never worked with a married or coupled partner. There was people who never had a partner and couldn't go step by step. So then we're at observation. Playful. We're at nurturing, playful. Then comes sensuous, which is very different than sexual. Of the senses, and especially somebody whose body parts do not work in the same way, or they're paralyzed. Well, they have other senses too. So of the senses, smells, touch, taste, all kinds of things. And then comes the sexual part. And so we would go step by step, where one of the nice things about the surrogate work is that the patient gets to experience these touches and also can give the touches. So it's practicing getting confident about looking somebody in the eye. I would say a lot of the things that, would put into like tantric sex examples, we did. We did the eye gaze. We did the handhold. We did, how does this feel? How does this feel to you? Because by the time you get to body parts, we did body mapping in the sense of looking at our bodies, front and back. And what do you like? And what don't you like so much? And wow. So there was confidence. I remember one young man, oh my gosh, it took him 2 years to take off his shirt.
Wow.
Well, we were meeting about once a week or so.
Wow.
And everything was done with his shirt on. Okay. He had been bullied and he had cut himself on his chest. And so he was really, but we did some healing touches on the chest too. There were a lot of tears many times. Then
I can imagine a lot of tears.
My goodness. And then after each session, then I would call the supervisor.
And report.
And the supervisor would call the patient, and we would go step by step. Remembering if you're going into people's apartments or their homes or meeting them somewhere, that the supervisor has to interview and see, is this appropriate person? This is not the person
is
who
it
goes...
safe for both?
Well, yes, safe for both people. And this is not the person that goes, hey, Volker, haven't gotten laid in a long time. No, that's not.
Course not.
This is not. This is not the surrogate.
Yeah.
I can talk to that person, in therapy, but this is not the candidate. If the candidate is using a lot of drugs or alcohol, again, I don't judge, but we want to see sobriety. Well, also, what is your sex response?
Right.
Oh, that's cocaine
they
response.
Cannot really
or that's,
speak to how they feel if they're not sober.
Yes, because we want to see, working as a surrogate, what your response is. Don't judge you. I don't. Okay. And if a person has needing anger work, that is not the person to be sending a surrogate to.
Yeah.
And there was one time I had to be very protective of one of our surrogates, because now I supervise 3 surrogates, and he got angry. Even though he knew this is step by step by step, he got angry at the surrogate. I come in, nope. I came in by phone at that time. Nope, you do not treat the surrogate like that. Remember, we talked about this. Remember, you signed an agreement on this. You get mad at anybody, you get mad at me. So,
is this covered by insurance or no?
It can be.
Good.
It can be.
Yeah.
The insurance that I put everybody in, if somebody comes into in sex therapy or trauma therapy that to do with sexuality or gender issues, because I work with a lot of gender variant children, and by the way, surrogates are not used for minors. It's not
right.
It's adults.
Yeah, no, I
adults.
imagine, yes.
But
yes.
I put it under a code called anxiety with mixed features. First of all, I don't think it's their business. I don't think it is the insurance business to know about what your private things are. But anyway, the surrogate work really helped a lot. And
I have a question that I'm sure would be in the minds of listeners. At what point does the surrogate take off their clothes?
Oh, they can.
How quickly or how?
Well, we can. It can be on the first time if they're comfortable. Usually they're not. But usually it moves from certain clothes taken off, then to underwear, and then to where there's nudity, and there's snuggling, holding, there is a shower event. Remember, things that those of us who have been, I'm going to say, blessed and intimate to have good and bad experiences, but they've never had. They've never been soaped up in a shower where we're not even worried about erections or lubrications, or right now we're not worried about having intercourse. We're concerned about, can you relax and feel? Because when you relax and feel, now your body's neurologic system, the autonomic nervous system. So a lot of people come in and they have erection problems because they're scared. Okay, so why would we start on the penis right on that moment?
Yeah.
So we don't. We have step by step by step, snuggling, holding, what we call saying good morning, good night to the body. And by the way, we also do this with couples. Same step by step by step. If they have a partner, same step by step. There's always a communication after. And one
communication is
what did you like? What didn't you like? What would you change? Any questions about? We're also concerned if they have any diseases, any meds that could get in the way. For sure, that's why I like the
But
dream
there is
team.
also communication throughout, or no? Or do you just play music and just try
It
to?
could be music. It could be music. It could be some people like the smells, of the senses, and other people do like to have some conversation. Usually we like, though, let's try different ways. Let's try some things in silence. Let's try music. Let's try scents. Let's see what goes on.
Breathing exercises?
Breathing is a big one. Breathing is very big. Eye open, eye closed. And if people have gone through trauma, there are triggers that we have to be very careful about.
Right.
And so then we can rework, and remembering they're going to see a counselor too.
Right.
So then I can say, as the surrogate, it was so amazing because I really value the surrogates that I supervise now, 1 man and 2 women, and there are LGBT surrogates as well around the nation. But the interesting part is I could ask a patient, on a scale of 1 to 5, how relaxed are you? And they may say, but when a surrogate goes in and does some of this touching and seeing, oh my gosh, then I get feedback that's really wonderful, really wonderful feedback and suggestions. And so...
Yeah, because it's specific. I mean, I personally feel a lot of psychological work and therapy should be at that level, because to just leave it at the level of language seems to me way too abstract and indirect, right? And also not personal enough, because language has been invented. Well, first of all, it's patriarchy's language, so it perpetuates all kinds of cliches. But also language has been invented to kind of be understood by the lowest common denominator, by most of us.
Yes.
So as a result, it doesn't really express individual personal truth so well. But imagine if, this were the norm and the psychiatrist with a proverbial couch used the couch for physical, therapy as well, and if the psychologists were able in general, to take, touch, the 5 steps of touch or breathing, and incorporate them in the healing modalities that they use. I think that it would be tremendously beneficial and make a lot of progress for people who kind of go in a loop, from therapist to therapist, from meds to meds. And, cannot get out of the darkness, because after all, love and nurturing is what gets you out of the darkest spots.
I have to say, the reason that I'm very cautious, because I've been on both sides, is that a lot of people have never had this. And I work with special needs kids, and some of them have their space issues. They don't want to be touched. They can send me a touch through an emoji. They can say, see, it depends on the, and what if I reminded somebody of their abuser? So, not only because of laws, but because of attachment. Now, I have to also be careful, because a lot of people attach themselves to me. And I'm not even talking about the surrogate. I'm talking about attach themselves because they didn't have, I want to see you. And when we're actually done with, that's why we have to have people on our dream teams. We send them to massage therapists because we want them to be nurturing. We want to have that skin.
Right. Well, the supervisory aspect is very important.
Yes.
So however
Yes.
it could be incorporated
Yes.
in more general practice, which I think it should. The supervisory aspect is super important for both sides.
And also, you do have, I'd have to say, in my years, you have people that take advantage of very vulnerable people. And so we've had some, not only medical, not only religious, mental health people who have forced people to have sex with them.
Oh, yeah.
But in a same kind of like, oh, here this is safe. This is like them. So
yeah, but that happens. I mean, that happens. I have stories of therapists that have nothing to do with surrogacy or anything, and they have definitely taken advantage sexual of
That's
their
right. So
of their
people
patients.
do need
So
to come speak up and out.
having the supervisor or even a double supervisory setup is amazing for that.
That's a safety factor.
Right. Yeah.
That is a safety factor. And because this is the point, when the surrogate work is done, and when it's done is when the patient feels it's done. Sometimes you go on to have manual sex, oral sex, vaginal intercourse, whatever. But remember, if somebody's paralyzed too, they might like the idea of it, but they may not feel. They may actually feel more in other parts of their body and have orgasm in different ways. But the interesting part about it is when it's done and completed, the surrogate goes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, of course.
And who remains is the supervisor or the counselor. And that's the safety part of it.
Right, yeah.
Because I'd have to say, because 99.9.9, you're not going to marry your patient. Except for Volker. And I say that because, again, there's no accidents in my life. And so 6 years into...
You had this a patient. You were the surrogate.
I was a surrogate. I was supervised by these two. And 6 years in, and I had never been really attracted. I mean, there were people I liked working with better. There were people I was very interested in, and we went step by step, people that we cheered and cried, and oh my gosh. And they went off. I remember one person, before I say this, one person, he worked with the, but he was always on a ship with men. And when we got to the shower experience, started to cry. Cry. Here was this man who was like, oh my gosh. And
so much macho.
And he needed help in first you brush your teeth and gargle and take a shower and okay. But he was so vulnerable, and he said, if I never have sex with anybody, I know I can feel. And we also, just amazing story. So, all right, I'm going 6 years along. And remember, this is before Viagra. So we have to look at this. This is pre-Viagra, pre-Cialis, all these
So all
things.
ED was not, could not be healed except...
Not in the same ways that we have.
Right.
And so someone said, I have a patient and I'd like you to see him. Okay, fine. Because we always meet in the counselor's office. You just don't go into somebody's home environment or hotel or whatever. And we meet in the psychiatrist or the counselor's office. I have a right to say no thank you as a surrogate, and the person has a right. The patient has a right to say that. So now remember, these were the days I was not the counselor in supervision.
Yes.
I couldn't do that, okay? I was the surrogate being supervised. I walk in, and there's this gentleman, and I'm fine, and yet there's a feeling. And I'm like, oh, Marilyn, maybe you're getting unprofessional because you've never felt this. And the interesting part is that this particular patient also had the feeling. And this particular patient is
first
now
sight.
my husband, who's sleeping over there away. He's not feeling so well.
Oh, 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. Well, half of the time we were not married.
So how
we were
long?
together.
Okay, so how long were you actually working together as surrogate patient?
Well, see, I went back to the supervisor and said, I can't work with him. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm attracted in a different way, and I don't want to mess him up, and I don't want to be accused of transference, and then I don't want to mess up this patient. He said, sometimes that happens, and let's see if we can find another surrogate. Well, there wasn't, but what happened is David wooed me. The word is wooed. And I was like, transfers. So for years, it was just like, okay, but we did the program. We did the same.
You did do the surrogate program.
We did the same thing.
The protocol.
I just wasn't in that surrogate role. And so our joke is 40 years later, is this still transference? That's our joke. And
that's great.
He was married before, but he had... And here's the interesting part. He had onset early things of diabetes. And in those days, we weren't trained like we are now. Now counselors would say, tell me what runs in your family. You got diabetes running in your family. You need to go not only get checked, but that's what might be creating, and for
the sexual dysfunction,
the erection
erectile
problem,
dysfunction.
Exactly, was because of the diabetes. Okay, his diabetes is under control, but he's still, since he's now close to 80, but since he's been 47, he's not gotten an erection on his own. Now, then Viagra came along, and Pfizer said, would you want to speak for us? See how these things happen. These things happen. They just come. They just kind of open the doors, and I go, okay. And as long as I'm not asked to do anything illegal or unethical, so we spoke for a while, and for a while Viagra worked, and then it didn't, because the diabetes got worse, and he's got stents in his heart. He's had heart attacks and high blood pressure, and so the interesting part, all this stuff that I had learned from being a surrogate worked for us personally as well. And he now can't get an erection since he's been 47. Now he would have to take a shot in his, like an EpiPen in his penis. Papaverine, Regitine, prostaglandins. And so... And there are some newer techniques now, but they didn't have them in those days. So he was put into a surrogate program.
And what doctor does one go to for that type of medication?
Oh, you mean the shot? That would be a urologist who is trained.
That's what I thought, but just
a urologist. That's why we know our dream team people.
Yeah.
A urologist who is trained and would want to know, who are you seeing? If you have this problem, who's your counselor you're seeing? So the dream teams work really well.
Yeah.
And in fact, the younger sex therapists, often they work like once a week in the medical doctor's office, where they meet the patient, which I think is killer. That is like great.
That's how it should be.
How it should be. So,
what makes a good surrogate? Like, what type of personality? Well, I think it probably would be a Scorpio, but that's because
I'm a Sag.
A Sag too, right?
But I think it has to do with understanding that you're there, and I think of it because I'm a teacher. It's offering someone this learning opportunity. And if I can do that step by step by step, and being supervised, and also that whatever the other issues are, they're being addressed. Surrogacy it's not a magic answer. It's not for everybody. And so...
Oh, for sure it's not for everybody. But I do feel that, more people should, look into it, at least, take the training and see how they feel. And I think that there is a self-healing that happens in that process too, because being able to learn that in order to help others, just like you said, helps you in your own sex life, and being able to kind of slow the sexual experience down and get it down to the mechanics, right? And kind of liberate it for under whatever guise, liberated from all of the, romantic assumptions or all of the, impassioned, eroticized, tropes that we're so like committed to by our conditioning. Liberating that from like the bodily functions and sensations, I think is healthy for everyone.
And also people get really bad advice. Like if you have a 40-year-old virgin, let's say, and you're told, hey, go to this club.
Right.
They are so scared. And so we have to go step by step with them many times to say, well, let's meet outside before a session and let's meet for coffee or let's meet for lunch, because they have no dating experience of what do you talk about? What is it? They can be absolutely brilliant, and they can be very successful on their job, very, very much.
Yeah.
But that shy,
because they may be overthinkers, which makes them really good at something.
Very much.
But not so good with their sensual expression.
And so they've been given advice, and I have no problems if somebody says I'm a part of the lifestyle and they have an open relationship where they go to clubs that we used to call swinging clubs. Okay, but that is not the place for a 40-year-old virgin. Like, hey, just go there and you can have sex with somebody.
Right.
They've never even held hands. So
also, sex and intimacy, like intimate sex and like a quickie or transactional sex are very, very different experiences.
Absolutely.
So someone may very well have had transactional sex, and I don't mean simply with like a sex worker. It could be like on a date on Tinder or whatever, a dating app. You go, you pay for dinner, you have a quickie. But that's not the same as understanding your body and like, the range of your sexual language and the range of your sexual experience and how far you can go, which takes time and intimacy and trust and openness. And like you said, that's where the learning comes in.
Absolutely.
And it's a shame to kind of like die and have only had sex one way, the first way that you came up with.
Yes. By the way, anything that has to do inside the body, there's on me, not in me, on me, not in me, on me, not in me. Anything inside the body is done with safety. There's always done with, we have our surrogates tested, we have the patients tested. We have anything that's inside, a condom is used. Always. Always.
Yeah. And I always advocate that for sure, just every time you have a new lover, get a test, like have it readily available. It's not such a big deal. I don't know why it's not like a matter of course, like, a basic, like a social endeavor, exchange.
Exactly.
This is my phone number, I really want to be with you. Oh, I want to be with you too. Okay, I'm going to like email you my, latest like blood work. Done.
See?
It doesn't have to be like a big project, or have any personalized meaning. And the same thing I feel, with like the language, the language of sex, which is not the same as the language that we use all the time, and having access to that, and knowing like special terms allows you to understand what's happening to you and what's happening to them, and then you normalize all kinds of stuff that otherwise feels like it's fringe or, whatever, too far out or stigmatized in some way, right?
Part of that body mapping, I'm thinking part of them is not only looking at your body, but also being allowed to look at the surrogate's body. And I'm talking whether it's fingernails, toenails, labia, scrotum, anus, earlobe. It's also really, I call it the extraordinariness, the extraordinary art of bodies. And again, the patients who are candidates for surrogate work they've never really had that opportunity, or they did, and then as some of the patients had horrific accidents or soldiers come back and people didn't want to be with them, and they didn't know how their new body worked.
But by taking that into our own practice, and our own kind of like sex life, I feel that we liberate each other from like the cliches that are so artificial and do not serve us personally, any of us. about beauty, you know, and so to be able to say, to do this body mapping, and you know, and do it with open, conscious, you know, heart, it kind of liberates each other from all kinds of like self-judgments, you know. Oh, like I have nice boobs, but I don't have a nice butt, or you know, my ears are too big, but I have nice fingers. You know how we and this is all like stories, harmful stories that we tell ourselves based on, you know, a narrative that's set up by whatever branding corporations, by an economy that wants to sell us goods, you know.
Yes.
And so I feel like instead of, you know, having painful cosmetic work and, you know, kind of getting in the body and changing it and hurting it and cutting it and nipping it, in order to, you know, hopefully fit in, and in the process scarring it, creating scar tissue for life. Instead of that, you know, maybe you can just meet a partner and do this mapping and try on both ends to liberate yourself from what you think is the norm. So if your partner doesn't look like the magazines look, you know, accept that. Like, that's really the first step to a great sex life, I feel. Liberate yourself from the establishment and find, you know, the beauty in everything, the way that we would with something non-human, you know?
Absolutely.
We could see a dog and say, oh, that's so cute. Or we could see a flower and say, that's so beautiful. We don't have a standard. We don't say, oh, no, you know, like that has to look like a rose.
Yep.
Right? But so in everything else, we allow more variety, and we're interested and welcoming the variety. And if we can do that in, you know, with our bodies, in the process of intimacy, I think that would be like game changing.
And you know what I find is people who go through this process, they have great skills. They develop. And I'm certainly not against get up, get in, get out, get off, goodbye. I'm not against it. I am.
Well, if it's the only option, yeah.
I'm not against it. But this process offers people to develop skills that a lot of people who have had lots of sex may not have.
Right.
Skills and communication. And by the way, I work with people who are nonverbal. So when we talk about language, how people communicate is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, people from different cultures and how they were taught and what was not said and what they have great questions about. Legitimate, very wonderful. I'm really looking at, because a lot of teenagers now, when you were talking about body, one of the students that I was teaching at St. Thomas University showed me something called, it's on a YouTube called Big Mouth. And Big Mouth is a cartoon person that was talking, and there's a number of them. This one was about bodies and about, there's no one right body. And so, but they were doing it in kind of a rap and kind of a cartoon form. And I'm thinking, I'm hoping that this next generation, when they see Ken and Barbie, who still don't have genitals, the baby dolls I have all their parts. They have all their parts, their genitals on them. But Ken still has bumps. But they're coming in different ethnicities, and we're seeing the different qualities and different sizes. Okay, I hope young people also could come to that place of knowing about my body is not the same even as yours, but I might be even responding differently about what I might like to touch.
Everybody responds differently. Everybody looks differently. Every genital is different. It's like your fingerprints. We're each, you know, different. We're going to be different. We're going to react differently. And I find that that's like part of the beauty of sexuality, you know, and the closer you look at the body and its responses and how it's truly like an instrument, you know, when it's loved, the more exciting it becomes. Absolutely. So, you know, instead of like getting stuck on some cliche, you know, image that's taken from a distance, just going in and being open, I think, is pretty revelatory, and it does make you a better lover. So it makes you then more popular.
Yes,
I personally think it's appropriate for everybody, virgins of all ages.
I think so.
Why wouldn't it be appropriate if it were socially acceptable? Imagine, that like you go to school and you have someone teach you these things, so you're not like guessing or looking at porn or trying to listen to like your older siblings, and it's already such a difficult age, and then you come up with all kinds of misconceptions that stay with you until, something major happens for them to change. Like, you take sex ed classes, for example, or listen to the show. And I did want to mention regarding the surrogacy program, I asked you about the insurance. What I liked about that aspect is that, in our culture right now, especially in, late capitalist America, a lot of these lessons and services are expensive. We have a version of it in Tantra, or a version, there are different versions of this learning, to kind of like slow down and experience sex in different new, open, limitless ways that are not defined by male ejaculation or even female ejaculation alone. But they're not available to the people. They're not available to the working class people. They're not available to the people who can't afford them. They're not available to the people who are not well enough. So again, it becomes something that like is available to the elite.
Yes.
If they look for it.
Yes.
But it should be a free service.
Right.
It should be something that we are, that by free I mean that the government or the philanthropists or whatever, kind of open it up and make it accessible to millions and millions of people around the world. And I think that would
everybody should have that
everybody healthier
and options of many, many things.
Yes.
And it can be.
It should be covered
That's
by
why
every health insurance.
That's why I believe in the supervision part, so that the supervisor can put it under anxiety with mixed features intervention. You don't have to say surrogate. You don't have to do that to break confidentiality. And I'm really glad that has worked for a number of people. And I've just been the only word that because I came from a religious background, is blessed to be in these situations.
Yeah, it is a blessing.
And guess I was thinking of another one. We were working with a transgender person who was making transitioning and really did not have hardly any sex at all, and so worked with one surrogate, one gender, and then in transitioning worked with the other. And
that's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, it was an amazing, amazing process. Not that it was easy on this person's side. It was very brave, and it was very, very interesting to see. And the reason was that they wanted to be comfortable with the body parts that were not going to be changed, and they wanted to have some experiences about what can I do step by step with the body parts that I have, and don't have to necessarily go out and find somebody. And usually it's somebody I would have to, go online and I'm not, again, a lot of people go online, they find partners. What I love about this program is that it's step by step with a lot of communication about it. And yay. So I'm very much for it. And I have 3 of the most wonderful surrogates that I've worked with. And there are many around.
Yeah, there are many around.
Certainly not against...
And it exists, and people can Google it. Yeah. And also you were one of the founders of the Sexology Institute.
The International Institute of Clinical Sexologists, and that's Dr. Carol Clark. And,
which, once again, that's part of the process of education, spreading the learning, the sexual learning. So, taking the classes, being certified, and then, advising, coaching. This is all of what we can do to kind of, incorporate sexual study into our own sex lives.
And I want to tell you, I'm going to brag about Florida because there's a lot of things not to brag about Florida, but okay. Florida is one of the only states where you must take a sexuality class at a master's level to get licensed as a mental health or counselor. And it was not required before, and it's not required. But what happened is somebody did something that was inappropriate, lost their license, and everything like that. And so we in Florida said, we got to do something. We have to. Right. And why wouldn't a counselor
Can you imagine,
a sexuality class? Why?
That drama or tragedy has to happen for that to become law.
That would be just normally.
That should be part of it. That should be part of it worldwide.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm arguing for sexuality class before you graduate, high school, not maybe even younger, middle school. So for sure, if you're going to be a therapist.
We go into middle schools, and the way that happened was because of the AIDS Project, and this was in the 80s, and we had gay men's health crisis in New York, and gay men's health crisis in Los Angeles. That's all we had.
Yeah.
There were it wasn't even called HIV. And there were, we had to tell people they had this, and we didn't even know. There was no 1-800 numbers. And certainly we didn't have PEP and PrEP and all the wonderful things that are there now. But
PEP and PrEP are pills to take before and after sex.
Right.
When you're having exposed
HIV,
gay sex. Yeah.
And also a person who's heterosexual can take it too. But the interesting part of it is that, and not everybody, it doesn't work for everybody. Remember, if you take a med, what works for one doesn't always work for another. So we're always interested to see what happens and how does it work with other things that you're taking. So we didn't have any of those. And so we were going by the seat of our pants. When you start something, but we got to write curriculum. And that meant we got to write school curriculum. And that meant, because I was a teacher, I could go in and teach schools, principals, everybody we went in to teach, the public health department and the school systems. We joined together on a dream team, and for everybody from the head of the school system, everybody, to people who cook, to people who clean, to all the teachers, and we wrote curriculum. And middle school is where it starts, exactly, and goes up from there. So we've been very, very happy about that.
Oh yeah, we've
Florida,
come a long way.
But the World Health Association, the World Association of Sexology, WAS, has some great training programs around the world. So
so just look for it all. Keep staying curious. Thank you for coming, Marilyn.
This was happy sexuality to everybody.
Happy sexuality to everybody. Yes. Thank you for listening.
But you don't say thank you for coming too loosely to a sex therapist. You say thank you for arriving. Just a sexology joke about coming. And I hope you all come in healthy ways. So
thank you for trusting us.
Sure.
And until next week, speak sex. Still my... could make love incessantly, I would be God.